It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. Take Command Podcast. Logan Paulsen there. Craig Hoffman here. And with us today, the one and only Jeremy Greene. He's an ESPN draft analyst, host of Sportsocracy on ESPN Radio down in Asheville. And I mean, you hear this guy talk in a second, and you'll be like, yep, that guy's from the Carolinas. I say that as someone from the Carolinas who, moved down from New York, so I don't quite have the accent, Jeremy. But the beard, the accent, I feel home right now.
Well, the beauty is that the guys that listen to all of your stuff finally see a face to the name, and they realize when I said I am Timu Luke Combs, I was not lying.
Perfect. Can you sing?
Yeah, I actually grew up singing with Luke Combs because he's from Asheville too. Amazing.
All right, so a concert coming up later in the show. But we're going to talk draft, obviously, with Jeremy. He's with us for the whole show today. Logan, I'm so sorry that your beard has been relegated to second on this show.
It's strong.
So,
it's a nice red beard. It's good.
Yeah.
It's quality.
This is actually cut down from when I first met Logan.
I know. I was going to say, he's trimmed himself up. He's trimmed himself up a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I have to. I probably won't sleep again until about April 28th. So I had to get everything to nice and static so I don't look like a complete homeless person by the time I leave Green Bay.
You should have just let it grow, and then you could have folded the beard over as a pillow.
Oh, my God.
I'm probably going to need that because I know you guys are doing your stuff from Washington itself. The accommodations in Green Bay, that's been interesting.
I'd imagine. Yeah.
We're staying in something called Sturgeon Bay. Oh. And I'm one of those hashtag birds aren't real people, and I'm going to make this a shtick that we're staying in fictitious Bird Bay.
Fictitious bird, yeah. Now that, I went to draft in Detroit last year. Was more than happy to. They got the second overall pick. Get an interview with Jaden. Getting to Detroit's a fairly popular airport. Getting to Green Bay, I'm perfectly fine operating from here this year, only to watch them trade out at the end of the first round and not actually pick anyone on Thursday. So, Jeremy, we were talking right before we hit record here, and there is a prospect that you have not been very high on, to put it kindly, over the last 2 months, that now you think actually is the perfect Washington Commander, and nobody else. What, you didn't tell us who it was. We said, you stop right there, sir. We're going to hit record. Who is this prospect you've been bashing for 2 months that you have now decided is actually perfect for the Washington Commanders? And why?
All right, so I'm going to walk you through how I got here.
Okay.
And I want to see if you can tell me who it is. Because it's a really popular name.
Okay.
So Dan Quinn, when he was with the Cowboys, he took a prospect that didn't really have a position. He was just a really natural athlete that could really get after a quarterback. And he almost made like a Joker role for him. Now, once he left, this guy does not still do that. He plays one very specific. Micah plays one very specific position. There's a guy in this draft that the biggest thing I have hammered him on is that I don't like the fact he has no position. He can get after a quarterback. He's a little bit undersized. The natural athleticism of him is really intriguing to me, and I don't think he's going as high as other people do. Who am I talking about?
Does he play two positions now?
He really played. He played one almost exclusively. I don't have the snap count up in front of me, but he did play two, just way more of one than the other.
I have a guess, Logan. Do you have a guess?
So I was going to say Jalon Walker, but Jalon Walker does two things. But I mean,
it's Jalon Walker. You're exactly right.
I was going to say Jahad Campbell because I think Walker's mid-mock so much higher they wasn't even on my radar. I've seen Campbell anywhere from like top 10 to second round.
Before we get going, this is the one thing I really appreciate about Jeremy is like I think he looks at the national stuff, but he's going to tell you exactly how he feels about a prospect. And I have a feeling that you feel very similar to the guys at NFL Stock Exchange. Like they're not very high on him. They have like a borderline second round grade on Jalon Walker. And
that's about where I'm at.
Yeah. And I kind of feel that. I feel the same way about it because I don't think he's a great off-ball player. I don't think he's a full-time edge, but I like the way you were kind of leading into this description of him as saying someone who could maybe do, kind of in the right system, be figured out by a guy like Dan Quinn.
So the funny thing is, I did not think about Jahad Campbell, who now that Craig said that, I realized that the lead up, I can't even tell him he's wrong because everything I said would cater to Jalon Campbell as well. I see Jalon Campbell as a full-time edge. I don't think he will ever be an off-ball linebacker in the NFL. His instincts are not good enough, and he started as an edge rusher. I did not like Jalon Campbell much either until I really did the deep dive on his background and realized he was a 5-star edge. And that made all of it make sense of that's why your instincts are the way that they are. Because you're not used to playing off ball trying to patrol the middle of the field. You're used to see quarterback, kill quarterback. And it made everything with him make more sense. Now, Jalon Walker, you're right. I do agree with the NFL Stock Exchange guys, Connor and Trevor.
Yeah.
I look at Jalon Walker and go, in the wrong scenario, you're going to get completely washed out. And if what you think you're going to do with him is put him in the middle of a 3-4 and then set him as an edge rusher in nickel, which is what I think several teams would use him for. If that's how you're evaluating him, he's a 2.
Yeah.
If he's almost a hybrid, doesn't really have a position player. Look, we're getting more positionless as time goes on. Brian Branch ran a 40 that I think I could have outrun. And yet he has found a way to be, I think borderline all-pro.
I think he did make the all-pro team last year.
I was going to say that, and I went, I know Kirby Joseph made it, but I can't remember if he did.
Yeah, I think he made second team. I can look it up, but I'm looking up other stuff. But keep talking.
One of the smartest things I ever said was when the Lions hired Brad Holmes. I went, you're about to have a golden age, because I knew him loosely, and I went, that is one of the top 5 smartest people I've ever met in my life. But that's where we're at, is that there are guys that come to this league that just don't have a position. Jalon Walker does not have a position, but he does do certain things particularly well. And I don't trust a lot of coaches to get the most out of him. But I had a lot of these questions about Micah Parsons when he came out too. People forget this. He had some huge character red flags that were super strange. That I do think it's funny that he got to the NFL and everybody forgot about that.
Yeah.
But he wasn't just this ready-made prospect. He did the exact same thing they did with Abdul Carter, which is that he played off the ball. Then they actually used him as an edge. It was kind of hard to pinpoint, what does he do exactly? He's freakishly athletic, and I know he can get after a quarterback, but where does he play? I like the fact that Dan Quinn has had to work through that. And now in terms of just raw talent, Jalon Walker is, I would say, a top 15 talent. But then he gets into there's a reduction if you're an off-ball linebacker. There's a reduction for, I think he's a little undersized to be a natural edge. And so you start peeling the onion back and you realize that he's going to fall. If he doesn't go to Carolina at 8, because Carolina allegedly really likes him. I'm down here in the Carolina market, so I get to hear a lot of it's Jalon Walker or Shamar Stewart, and then I get yelled at. I'm not making the pick. You get that, right? I'm just taking what they're telling me and telling it to you. I'm an intermediary, so please stop yelling at me. But if Jalon Walker doesn't go at 8, I couldn't tell you a team between 9 and 29 that really makes all that much sense.
That's really interesting. Just to clean up aisle fact checks here. Brian Branch was snubbed from the All-Pro team. He finished 4th in the AP All-Pro voting this year. So that's that. And then I also pulled up, courtesy of PFF, his snap count for this year. Or for all 3 years, really. But they considered it 249 snaps on the D-line, 311 in the box, and then 61 in the slot for 2024. So, Logan, having seen DQ work up close and personal, what do you make of that? The idea that, and not that this guy is going to be Micah. Like, I think he ran like a 4.5 40, and Micah's a 4.3 guy. Like, they're different caliber of athletes, and that's not to say Jalon Walker's a bad athlete. It's to say Micah Parsons is like an alien from outer space. But the idea at 29, especially, we've talked about how anybody that's there is going to have some flaws. Otherwise, they'd be a higher pick. That idea that Jalon Walker could have the pass rush juice that this team is looking for at that spot.
Yeah, I think that's a really intriguing idea, because again, I think Jeremy brings up a lot of issues that I have with him as a prospect. Like, I don't think he's good enough to play off-ball linebacker, and I don't think he's good enough to be a full-time edge. Like, I think he shows tremendous flashes as a blitzer, as a edge rusher in certain situations. And so I think if you could find a coach that understands how to utilize that, I think that would be the way to go, right? I think that would be the direction that I would feel most comfortable with his utilization. And so as much as I think the NFL, there are certain pockets of the draft community that are higher on him. I kind of am more aligned with Jeremy here. Like I could see him taking a little bit of a tumble because he's got 31-inch arms. He's not going to play full-time edge. He's too stiff to play off-ball linebacker. So in this era of positionless football, like I think he'd be perfect for what Dan wants to do. And I do think he has the potential to be kind of this pass rush specialist, and in the same way that, how everyone's criticism of Frankie Louva last year was that he's a great blitzer but couldn't rush off the edge. I kind of think it's reversed for Walker a little bit. I think he's better off the edge. I think he's got better feel, better bend, and more kind of raw horsepower to get there. So I think that'd be a tremendous fit. But I also kind of wonder, Jeremy, like how you see him comparing to a guy like Donovan Ezaraku, who the more I've watched Donovan Ezaraku, because again, he's getting mocked here quite a bit, the more I'm like, man, this guy, I don't know why people aren't talking about him going higher than 29. I don't know why 29 is his floor, like why he's a fringe first round pick. His production's great. His pressure numbers are great. His kind of assortment of pass rush moves is great. So to me, it just seems like if you wanted a pure pass rusher, and again, I think Walker as a pass rusher could be special, but I think Donovan Ezaraku, for whatever reason, is not getting that same love. Could you kind of peel back that onion there a little bit, talk about that?
So Ezaraku, I think, would be ideal in Washington. The problem is I think you have about as good a chance of getting Abdul Carter as you do getting Donovan Ezaraku.
Talk about this. Let's hear about it. You're the first person who said this, and I think this is an interesting point.
So I'm one of those weird unicorns of I talk to people in the NFL and I talk to media guys as well. And I don't know if it's because he played at Boston College. I don't know if it's because I'm an ACC guy. So, I mean, we're Carolina affiliates. So I deal with the ACC hands-on. And I'm a Florida State fan. So I've seen this kid. I know how good this kid is. The media does not – there are things that the media puts out there that I see in mock drafts, and I go, that's not accurate. And Donovan Ezaraku is one of those. Donovan Ezaraku. I also want to call him Donovan Ezaraka, and I don't know why, because his name is nowhere near spelled that way. So apologies for however I butcher his name for the next 45 seconds. I think his drop dead spot's Baltimore. I think he could go as high as all the way probably to Atlanta at 15.
Right.
I don't see any way he's going to get all the way down there.
So, but why do you think is it just the market? Is it just the market that he's playing in? Like, because again, like when you watch the film, like he does everything. He does everything you want. He's got great length. He's got great bend. Like he looks like, I don't want to say the best pass rusher in the class, like, but maybe the best natural feel for that kind of element of the game. There's guys with more horsepower, obviously, but like he's special.
I've always said that one of the things that I noticed about media guys, having now been a media guy for a handful of years, is that there is an element to sexy. Donovan Ezaraku to the average fan is not sexy because the average fan is not sitting around grinding tape, looking at this kid's bend and things like that. They're looking at the fact he played on a bad team in the ACC. He had 17 sacks. Nobody cares. They're not getting that deep. They're looking for the sexy name. Now, the funny thing of that to me is Mykel Williams, who watching his tape to me is a lot like watching my laundry dry through the little window in my dryer. He somehow is sexier than Donovan Ezaraku, and I don't get that at all.
Could it be the size?
It's the traits for sure. It's the traits.
He's like 6'2", a little shade under 6'3", 248, and they, if we can get that at 260, and it's like, I don't think 12 pounds is going to make up for the lack of bend, the speed, the feel. Like we can also get him some protein and some iron. It'll be all right.
I will never understand why the common fan, the average fan, gets so locked in to so many traits when you're so wrong about a lot of them. Oh, an edge rusher has to be 6'5". You realize I could list off 50 guys that were under that were really high quality edge rushers. Look at Nick Bonito in Denver. The measurables on him were 100% the reason that he fell. The production was there, but he didn't line up to every single one of these metrics that people wanted for an edge rusher. He was one of the best edges in the NFL last year because you put him into the right position. One of the things that I'm going to write a book that's going to be put out the day after my death of all of the weird little things that I use for how I evaluate players. I wish I was with a team in some shape, form, or fashion, because I do stuff with the Panthers and the Falcons. And so I'm having to evaluate for 32 teams. If I'm looking at just one team, there are traits that I do not care about. You have 3 defensive tackles. And so I'm going to take Washington here. You basically have 3 converted defensive tackles that are playing on your odd front in that 3-4. That makes me care way less about the measurables on my edge rusher. So my edge rusher is a little undersized. Okay, I have 3 giants playing on the defensive line. I need this kid to be a little bit more mobile because I've got Johnny Newton, I've got Daron Payne, I've got all of these big, gigantic guys that you have up front. I need somebody that can get around the edge because I'm not funneling guys behind those big dudes. I'm trying to get around the outside. So for me, Donovan Ezraku is a little short, he's a little fast, or he's a little thin, which leads to him being faster than the average edge rusher. That's a positive to me. That's not a negative. Now, if I was trying to find a guy to play in an even front, and I've got, I'll use the team that I cover the closest, which is the New York Jets, and I've got Will McDonald on the other side. Okay, now Donovan Ezraku is a 3rd-round pick to me because I can't play McDonald and Ezraku together. I'd have to play him on the inside of Quinn and Williams, or on the outside of Quinn and Williams, excuse me. That's the only spot he could play. That's not as valuable to me. In Washington, Ezraku would be a top 15 player on the board for me.
I actually think that's right. Real quick, can you go through your edge rankings, like top 10, if you got them sitting in front of you? I know you got to pull them up real quick, just to see like where you're falling with all these kind of against the national media, really.
So I came super prepared. I have my full big board, which Logan has routinely said that I'm a witch because I have way too many guys on board.
I think we said 540.
540.
That's a lot of guys. We were at the combine. We're watching receivers run, and I watch a fair amount of guys. And he's like, "Oh, that's the 3rd receiver at Ole Miss. I like him." And I'm like, "I didn't even know that guy existed." And he's got a report on him. You know what I mean? So he's watched plenty of people for sure.
Yeah, I typically say no one watches more tape than Logan, and then Logan introduced me to Jeremy. And now, sorry, Logan, you've lost your crown in my world.
I lost my crown. That's right.
It's sitting there right on Jeremy's head.
Jeremy needs a hobby. I really wish. Because I've got golf, but I refuse to play golf other than when it's between 75 and 85, which in North Carolina lasts for about 8 days.
If you're lucky.
That's a week in May. And then it goes from cold to swelteringly hot. So
and then you might get, if you get another 4 days sometime in October, then sweet, we can get one more round in before the temperature drops too much.
Exactly. All right, so my edge rusher rankings, I go Abdul Carter out of Penn State at 1. James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee is my 2.
Oh.
James. At this point, I'm everything short of his, like, Paul Heyman. I'm going to put on the little necklace thing and just follow him around going, this is my tribal king. Mike Green, Donovan Ezraku, Nick Skorton, Princely, Uman Malayan, and then Josiah Stewart.
Wow.
Oladejo would be my 8.
Josiah Stewart is your, what is that, 6?
It would be my 7.
7, sorry. Yeah, and then
I love Josiah Stewart.
So
I don't care that he's a little tiny guy. I'll carry him around in my pocket.
So no Malik Williams on there. No Shamar Stewart, right, on there?
So Shamar, I don't evaluate as a natural edge.
Oh, I see.
So I break mine into. I get really, really narrow,
specific, right?
So Shamar Stewart's my number 1 5 tech.
I got you.
That to me is not a natural edge.
Sure.
Because it's almost unfair to compare the other 5 techs that are maybe not the freak athlete that Shamar Stewart is to him.
Yeah.
So, and I think it's unfair to compare him to somebody like Abdul Carter. He only had 4.5 sacks. You also got to look at how he plays. You got to look at where he plays. You got to look at the fact Texas A&M moved him around constantly, and he never got cemented at a spot. I like Shamar Stewart. I am here telling the Carolina Panthers, if you're down to Jalon Walker and Shamar Stewart, please,
I think so.
For the love of all that's good and holy, take just Shamar Stewart.
I love the fact that you break them up like that, by the way. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that's how teams operate. And, that means, like, if you're Washington and you're looking for something, you're picking from a different list than if you're New York and you're picking for something else. So, Logan, I'm curious then for you, and then to Jeremy, bounce this to you as well. if you're Washington at 29, like which list are you picking from? Because they play both fronts. They are very multiple. They need guys on the edge. Like their biggest problem last year, for as much as trouble as they had getting after the passer, was that they could not set the edge in the run game, and that caused a bunch of problems behind them and inside of them. So the idea of a big run stuffing 5-tech, like, that is appealing. But so is a guy who can have juice on the edge, because they went and signed Dietrich Wise, for instance, to try to fill that role. They re-signed Cleveland Ferrell to try to do it better in less snaps. So like if some of the players that are ranked relatively the same are available at 29, Logan, I'll have you go first and then bounce it over to Jeremy. Like which list are you choosing from?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, because I think you could pick from both lists, and I know that's why they're there for the Washington Commanders. And I think, like, for example, Shamar Stewart's maybe a bad example of this, but I do think he's big enough and athletic enough to offer some improvement in terms of pass rush upside for the team. I think the thing that I look at is I like Dietrich Wise. I like his pass rush upside for the player of that size. I think he's good stopping the run. I think Cleveland Ferrell's good stopping the run as well. So to me, the thing that feels like needs to be added is pass rush upside. So I'm looking for someone in that first list that Jeremy talked about, kind of your true edge, maybe a little bit undersized, but someone that can bring a little bit of magic, like your Mike Greens, your Donovan Zarakus. I'm really glad you brought up, what's his name, from Michigan? You just mentioned his name.
Josiah Stewart.
Josiah Stewart. I like him in that role. When Mike Renner was on here, was talking about the guy from Central Arkansas too, David Walker, like that type of.
I want to love him so bad.
Talk to Mike Renner. He'll love him, because Renner's like his agent. I know
Renner, and Renner's a brilliant guy. I wanted to love him so bad when we got to the Senior Bowl, and I watched him like a 12-year-old girl at a Justin Bieber concert. And I could not stop being disappointed.
But you know what's crazy is, like, I felt the same way as you, Jeremy, at the Senior Bowl. And then I went back for whatever because we were talking to Renner, and he talks about him all the time. And I watched every one of his pass rush reps from the Senior Bowl. He didn't lose a rep. It wasn't always like the clean, sexy, but like the power was there, the bend was there, and I thought, but the point is, like, I'm looking for a guy in that bucket of edge rusher, right? Where, again, I can plug him in. I don't have to game plan anything. He's going to win creatively in our defensive front. And that's where I would go. There's a couple 5 techniques that I really, really do like, and I think they could add a ton of value, like Savion Jones from LSU or Jared Ivey from Ole Miss. I think are really interesting players, and I like them a lot. Even Landon Jackson, I'd probably put in that bucket. We've talked about him a ton. But again, like, I don't think they bring the pass. I love how they play, their physicality, all those types of things, but they don't bring the pass rush upside that I would assume they're looking for. Now, with Adam Peters, it's always a little bit hard, because it's like you think they're going in one direction, but he sees something unique in Landon Jackson or whoever, one of those guys I just mentioned, and they zig when you zag. But right now, Logan Paulsen, sitting here talking to 3 dudes who are not in the front office for the Washington Commanders, would say, hey, let's pick a juiced up, twitched up pass rusher.
And that seems like what they have less of. Jacob Martin is kind of the one guy who's in that bucket right now, or if you want to put Frankie in there as in the rotation, that's kind of all they got, Jeremy. So where do you come down on that when you look at Washington's roster, this list of players, and what could be possible at 29?
I agree with everything you said there. So I have a funny Dietrich Wise story if we get to it at the end of the show. I thought it was so funny when I saw that he had signed with you guys.
Well, I'll say, if you want to just tell it now, we can detour. You clearly haven't listened. We love a detour on the show.
We call them rabbit holes on my show, and I'm notorious for going down them. So I try not to do that on other people's shows.
Now we go.
So we do our show live on YouTube every day. So our ESPN radio show is simulcast. We call it the Sportsocracy because people can change the topic. If we start beating a dead horse, they can get into the chat and go, okay, enough. And it's almost like live interaction with hearing fans boo or cheer or something. So one day I'm in the studio, and it's right at the end of the show, and I see Dietrich Wise Sr. pop up in the chat, and I went, there's no way that's a very finite name. I've never met a person named Dietrich before. And he said, yeah, I'm that guy. Love your show. And that was the day I went, I'm getting somewhere, because I have an NFL player's dad that is watching my show.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
all right.
that was one of the coolest days ever. We went on like a 10-minute Dietrich, and I'm a lifelong Jet fan. So, I mean, he was a Patriot.
Yeah.
I went on like a 10-minute rant of how Dietrich Wise Jr. was the only Patriot that I could watch their film and really like.
That's so funny. Also, I'm so sorry that you're a Jets fan.
It is sadly. I need a reason to be angry. I started as a stand-up comedian, so I really needed fuel, and the Jets are great fuel.
Yeah, 1,000%. So
Edge
back
rushers.
as we take our detour back up, we've refound the main road. Edges.
So I agree with what Logan said. I want you to. I want the twitched up edge. I want the guy that's going to play on the outside, because I'm going to be honest with you. I did not love the Javon Kinlaw signing when I looked at the number, but then I thought about, okay, so where he's playing in this defense. I just got to watch him for a year with the Jets. He has deficiencies in his game, but there are things that he does well. And seeing him play in that 5-tech role is kind of interesting to me, especially if you can put somebody on the outside of him. I like Dietrich being on the outside of him, but I feel like that almost needs to be a rotation with somebody else. That's Josiah Stewart that we were talking about earlier. I like that pairing. Stewart's got to be with somebody that can hold up against the run. And Dietrich is more of a pass rusher than a run defender, but he holds up against the run better than Josiah Stewart does. So that's what I'm looking for, is somebody that can play that third down role. I need somebody that your job is to get a quarterback. Now, Landon Jackson, I loved him with Washington until they signed Javon Kinlaw. And now I'm not seeing how that rotation would run.
No, I think that's right. It's like stylistically, you need someone. You've got a lot. Like everyone says, it's like you want to give tackles and offensive linemen different looks, right? They've got a lot of these big body, physical, first and second down kind of, and guys that can rush the passer. Like I love that Jeremy brought that up. Like Dietrich Wise can rush the passer a little bit, but it's a different stylistically, right? It's a heavy hand, big kind of power rusher. Now, can we change the pitch basically by bringing in a different body type here, which I think is again, that's why I lean in that direction for sure.
Building a defense is a lot like building a band. If you have two front guys and no bass player, that's not going to be a great band. and look, not everybody gets the same notoriety. Nobody really cares about the guy that's playing the triangle. But if that's important to the band, then you've got to have a guy that does it.
You don't realize how important it is till you don't have one. It's like
Exactly.
there's something off with this song. This ain't right. Let's take a look at some other positions here that Washington could both consider in the first round, but maybe there's some depth in this draft as well in terms of, that second round pick at 61 where they sit. 4th, 5th round. They've got a couple 7th as well. They currently don't have a 3rd rounder, but we know that Adam Peters is not afraid to move around. But wide receiver, I think, is the other one that a lot of folks look at. If certain guys fall to the end of the first round, that could be interesting, but certainly later in the draft, getting someone who is a younger player in this room, along with Terry McLaurin, and then we'll obviously see what Luke McCaffrey does this year. First of all, Jeremy, is there anybody that you think will realistically be available that Washington should consider at 29 at the wide receiver position? And then we can talk about some guys down board.
No. I'll go ahead and tell you, I'm very low on this receiver class because I like Ted McMillan a lot. I'm really glad that he went to his pro day and ran, because if we had lasted 2 or 3 more days, I'm pretty sure he was going to be running in the 5s with what people were talking about with him. So he runs that 4.54. Now I think he goes in the top 10. Matthew Golden is, to me, a really fast version of what Stephon Diggs was when he was coming out, not the all-pro that he became. I hope he can get to that point where he's that kind of impactful player. I'll tell you a funny stat about Golden that really bothers me. In the last 5, back to 2020, so this would be 21, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drafts. I've had 28 first-round wide receivers that have either gone or are projected to go in the first round. So that encompasses the guys this year.
Right.
And I think it was McMillan, Abuka, Burden, and Golden that they lumped in for this year. I don't think all those guys are going in the first round, but for the premise of the conversation. Of the 28 receivers that have gone in the first round the last 6 years, no receiver would have averaged less yards per game than Matthew Golden.
Really?
Now, that seems like a super myopic stat, until you look at the list and realize that the Jamar Chases, Justin Jeffersons of the world are up here. And every bust that you've gone, how in the world did you fall in love with that guy, was at the bottom of that list. And they were all right above Matthew Golden. So that is one piece of empirical evidence that it does not a story make, but that is something I think to at least talk about. Ibuka, I don't think he should go in the second round. I think he should go in the first. I've got a fringe first round grade on him. I just don't think he does anything well enough that he will be that guy that's up at the top of the board as you're going through that in between days. Going Ibuka's the best player on the board, he'll wind up with Tennessee or somebody like that at the top of the second round. Now, where things get interesting to me at wide receiver is as time goes on, you get into the second round spot. I love Trey Harris. Trey Harris is poor man's Rome Odunze, and no one will convince me different. I watch them on tape, and they look exactly the same. I don't think either one of you is blindingly fast, but you do a great job of settling down in space. Trey's a Z now. I think he could ultimately be an X. That is a guy I would be looking for Washington. Problem is, I don't think he's getting by the Giants because he was the quarterback for Malik Neighbors in high school. And I have a feeling Malik's going to be going, hey, I need somebody that plays on the outside so I can play in the slot. But then you get into the Alec Ayumanor, who, Logan, you and I have talked about.
Yeah.
I love Ayumanor. I know he's a little stiff, but I think that comes from, like, that's a kid that went through the whole, I don't even know what to call it. It's like the Canadian exchange program where a kid is a really good high school prospect and they place him at a high school in America. And then he went to Stanford, and I'm not sure he got the best tutelage at Stanford. And so I think he's going to go into an NFL program, and he's going to get a legit big boy NFL wide receivers coach that is going to work with him and really show him nuance. Because nuance is the one thing
he doesn't have.
I see. He doesn't have the nuance. He has a really high football IQ. When I watch him, he knows where to settle down. And he's always on the same page with the quarterback, and the quarterback wasn't all that good. But then you get into they're very athletically toolsy, but maybe the tape is inconsistent. I'm looking at Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, Torrey Horton out of Colorado State, and then it gets very slotty from there with Jalen Noel and Jalen Royals and Jack Betch.
Dude, yeah.
I like all of those guys. Yeah,
they're all good football players, but this kind of goes back to the edge rusher conversation where it's like stylistically, like, what are you looking for? And I do think, like, you kind of alluded to it well there. There's only a couple guys that I think are like true outside players. You mentioned Trey Harris, you mentioned Higgins. I think both those guys fall in that category. Alec Ayumanor, I think that's
with Higgins.
But I agree. I think that's 100% right. I think he played slot at Iowa State. I think he's a better slot. I think his utilization is like Drake London at the NFL level. However, I do think the physicality is there that if a team was like, we want you to play off-ball Z, like, is that his best position? No, but can he physically do it? I think yes. You know what I'm saying? Kind of like in this, if you're saying, like, can you do something? I look at I love Jalen Noel. Like, he's one of my favorite players in the entire draft, but he can't play outside. You know what I'm saying? He can't play outside. Jack Betch, love his film. I don't want him playing outside ever. You know what I'm saying? So, like, in this world where people need to find the triangle player for your band, right? Like, there's only 3 dudes you mentioned there in the second round that I think are even close to that opportunity. Does that make sense what I'm saying, Jeremy?
Very, very much so. So the thing I would say on Higgins is, so one of my favorite comedians growing up was Mitch Hedberg. And he had this joke about chefs of he was a comedian and people would ask him if he could act. And he said, you don't look at chefs and go, but can you farm? I look at Jaden Higgins kind of the same way.
Right. Yeah.
I know he can play big, hyper mismatch slot. By the way, big slot is probably the catchphrase of the draft for me because there's so many of them. Jack Betch that you mentioned.
Yeah.
That is Julian Edelman. If Julian Edelman had rolled around in that ooze that made the Turtles, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And once I say that, you'll never unsee it.
That's true.
I know Jaden Higgins can play that slot role as the big slot, and he's a matchup nightmare. I am curious how much And this is a question that if I was a scout and I got these guys in the room for those 15-minute interviews at the combine, I want to know your honest to God answer to this. How big is your plate? So when I get you into the building, I know you can play big slot. Well, we've got Deebo Samuel that's going to play out of the slot, but he doesn't always play out of the slot. He can play out wide too. So on those snaps that Deebo plays out wide and you play in the slot, are you going to be okay if some of your reps in practice week to week are outplaying the Z, not necessarily for in the game, because I'm trying to teach you to be the Z. Are you okay running with the twos in those limited practice settings? Because this is helping my backup quarterback. It's also helping you get acclimated to playing Z. Is your plate big enough to take your big slot role in year one and add I'm learning to play Z in my spare time? Your plate big enough for that? Because if it is, I'm all the way in. If it's not, I'm still in. I'm just not in on playing you on the outside.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Dude, I think that's
I wonder,
exactly
frankly,
right.
if they had that conversation with Luke McCaffrey last year and then how that actually went in practice.
Right. Yeah. It's a great point. It's
Look, Logan can attest to this. Just being an NFL football player and doing your job is 100% a full-time job. And it's not a 9 to 5. It is a 24 hours of your day, keeping your body right, keeping your diet right, keeping your workouts right, not overexerting yourself. And so to ask a guy to not only play the position I drafted you for, the thing you can do right now, but also to add another job. This is one of the things I'm very curious about with Travis Hunter. How do you acclimate the practice time?
Totally.
Right, so he's the number one corner. Well, the number one corner, iron sharpens iron. If he's a receiver too, then who practices him? That's a totally different topic. But I think it's in the same vein of what I'm talking about here. There are more X guys as you go down the line.
As we go down, yeah, right.
They're developmental. Like I look at Dante Thornton.
Yeah.
I think he has all of the raw talent you could ever want. He's just raw. He's raw, and you're going to have to be patient with him. You're going to have to not do what the New York Giants did with Jalen Hyatt, which is go, hey, you run fast, but can you do anything else? You can run 9 routes with the best of them, and they never taught him how to do anything else. And so now he just sits on the depth chart, and every year people go, hey, is this the year he learned to do other stuff? Probably not.
Which, by the way, there was a great quote from Adam Peters the other day. Logan, it made me think of the conversation we had about has your career developed or how your career developed the other day on the show, where he apparently, when John Bates was considering coming back, they told him like, hey man, we love what you do as this blocking Y tight end, and we think you're one of the best in the league, but like, if that's all you are, that's not good enough for us. Like, we want to help you become a bigger,
right.
Like, we think there's more pass game upside. We want to develop you. And we know that Peters and Quinn and this staff is big on player development, which is why a guy like Thornton is so fascinating to me, because of course he is. He runs like a 4.3 and he's 6'5". And like, there's worse things you can have in your 4th, 5th receiver than a guy who's 6'5" and runs a 4.3 as a starting point. And by the way, hopefully he can tackle enough to have him run real fast on special teams as well in the meantime. But I think that's the interesting thing of like, some of these, we talk about the traits thing with the edge rushers too. Like, that's important down the list. Like, let's just take a flyer on a guy in the 7th round versus at 29, I want a guy who I know can play football and do a bunch of stuff because I need him to play right now.
It's funny for me that you said that way. I don't know that I've told Logan this at any point, as we've talked a lot about the draft throughout the process. So what you just said is how I do my grades.
Mm.
So my first round grades are guys that I know for a fact can walk in day one and do what it is that I'm drafting them to do, and they have potential to get better. Second round guys, I feel pretty sure you can do what I'm asking you to do, or I'm not sure you're going to get better. So like Darius Alexander, the defensive tackle. I think his AARP card is already in the mail because I think he and I went to high school at the same time.
He's old. He's an old man. I'm
38. I'm pretty sure we played against each other. So I don't think he's going to get any better. That makes him a second rounder. Even though the tape says first round, he's got that but. And then basically I do that as we tear down of every time a layer peels from that onion of you're going to take some development. I'm not sure there's a lot of upside. And you go down that list. I just keep dropping you. Every time a layer comes back, you drop a round.
Mm. It's smart. I think it's the way you should do it. I think a lot of national media people forget that there is risk, and the first round is about mitigating risk, right? So like, for example, I've had so many fans ask me about Luther Burden from Missouri, right? And the kind of one big year of production in 2023, the down year in 2024. There's some, we talked about a little bit on the show, like a little bit of character, like swirling, and who knows how accurate that is. But I look at that and I say, like, to me, that he's become a second round player because you're no longer managing the risk. It's become too risky. You got him in the third round,
3.
dude. I love it, man. But like, because again, like that. But that's the thing that fans don't understand is like, I'm making an investment with this first round pick, which objectively has value. If I pick a player, it has to be valuable, and if I trade for it, it's got tremendous value, right? If I trade the asset for another player in the NFL, so that's where I think that's the right way to do it. But every year, I'm like, this player that this team is taking, I think Jalon Walker is a really interesting example of this. There's a lot of risk associated with him because of the uncertainty of what he can be. And so I think that's where I think fans forget that NFL teams are actually making the decision and developing this person and understanding the trajectory in a way that that national media people don't have to worry about the same way, I think.
The thing I will say about national media people is, it's unfair to ask some of these guys that are not draft guys to do the same stuff that draft guys do. There are some of these entities that they ask their on-air talents, just, hey, what does your mock draft look like? Well, your average commentator doesn't have the nuance of, like Tampa Bay. This pick, I've had blood come out of my ears multiple times. Of Tampa Bay takes a corner in the first round. Yeah, but they play off-ball zone, and you just took a press man corner.
Right.
And then your excuse is, well, I'm sure Todd Bowles would like to play more press man corner. You sure about that, bro? Because he's never done it ever across 3 teams. Never done it. So I don't think he wants to. That's just a rant for another day. Sorry. I do that. I apologize. I want to go to the Luther Burden thing that you just said.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought up Jalon Walker and Luther Burden together. So the character issues with Luther Burden can confirm. His attitude last year, I think it's so funny how people look at him. People look at him and say, well, the offense got worse and the quarterback play got worse, even though the quarterback's borderline draftable in this class. Everything got worse. So you had a top 10 to 15 tackle on this team. You lost Cody Schrader. That was it. That was your high-end running back from last year. Why do you get a pass on the offense got worse? Why do you not get none of that gravy hits his taters? And I'll never understand why.
So let me say this to you real quick, and I think you'll agree with this. Like when you look at Tetro McMillan, the quarterback there played objectively worse than he did last year. But Tetro McMillan,
terrible scheme fit. Yeah, but the coach changed. Jed Fish left and went to Washington. In came Brent Brannon, and he didn't fit it as well.
And so, but Tetro McMillan's stats are the same, if not better this year, right? Like he's the same player because he's a dominant perimeter player in this draft, for example. And so he
bulked up in 2 games, and people really narrow in on he had 2 huge games, and the rest of it was just really good. You also got to remember he had a 5'9" quarterback that was playing in badly. But Jed Fish set that offense up to succeed with Noah Fafita and to succeed with Tet McMillan. Brent didn't do that. Now, a year from now, I think he's a great coach. But I don't hold that against Ted.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, but I'm saying I think it's an interesting point of comparison, him to Luther Burden, right? There's been no decline in production with Tetro McMillan, but Luther Burden, like you're saying, has seen a noticeable difference in production. And when you're saying you're a top 10 pick, right? I don't want to say you should be scheme proof because nobody's scheme proof, but you should still look somewhat dominant. And that's the thing that I get with Luther Burden that's a little bit hard to negotiate.
Luther Burden for me is what I liked about you mentioning Jalon Walker there. They have kind of the same problem of, I'm not doubting your natural athleticism or your natural God-given ability. What I'm doubting is your role and how I'm, for Burden, how I'm going to manufacture your touches, because you're not a good route runner. You're basically a glorified version of really poor man's Deebo Samuel, maybe slightly wealthier man's version of Laviska Shenault. But can you develop into an actual route runner? Your attitude is kind of a big deal in that because I'm going to have to teach you something that you should have learned 5 years ago. So now it's not just what we were talking about, learning your job, doing your job. You're not just doing your job. I'm having to teach you how to do your job as well. And you've got to have the commitment and the drive and the want to be better. And all I ever hear are people make excuses for Luther Burden of, well, the offense got worse. I think he's a big reason the offense got worse because it's hard to get him the ball. He's not a big guy. He's not a good route runner. He really only wins with foot speed and straight line burst, usually coming out of the slot because a guy can't get his hands on him. He gets a step on him. He's not really all that open. That's on you. I can't make you more open. You have to get open. That's your part of the job. I have to get you the ball, but you have to get open in a space where I have a throwing window to get you the ball, and he does a terrible job of that. Every time I watch Luther Burden, he goes down about 10 spots for me. By the end of this, I'm going to have him as a priority undrafted free agent.
Take Command Podcast, Logan Paulsen, Craig Hoffman, Jeremy Greene is with us for a few more minutes here. All right, Logan, we talked about edge, we talked about wide receiver, we've gone down a couple rabbit holes along the way. What else do we want to hit with Jeremy before the end of our hour together here?
So the thing I really wanted to ask about was corner and just defensive back play in this draft, because I think there are some really interesting players that are kind of, Malachi Starks, I think is a good player. Nick Emmanwori, I think is an interesting player to talk about. But then I think the other thing that I find interesting about the cornerback specifically, there's a lot of guys that are very talented, but there's a lot of guys that are also banged up real bad. You know what I mean? And so, like, where do you think the value is for that group? And is there a player at 29 you'd say, hey, maybe this is the right fit for Washington? And again, like, I love that you are kind of anti-national media here, so I'm really curious to hear what you got to say about it.
I'm going to tack on a part B to this question, too, because Quinn is notorious for finding guys later. So is there a guy that's in your 540-player board that you're like, down here in the 5th round, that's a Dan Quinn corner?
All right, so let me ask you a question. You know this team infinitely better than I do.
Yeah.
I have to cover all 32 teams, so I know the scheme, and I want you to give me a 2-sentence synopsis of what are you looking for in a corner.
So I think for Joe Whitt Jr., the thing he is going to want most is a corner that can play man coverage. That's what I think. A man coverage corner that can tackle. Those two things.
I was going to say the 2-sentence version then becomes we need a press, or not necessarily press, just a man coverage corner who is not afraid to be physical and tackles well.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I'm going to draw you an analogy. I love analogies. I'm real big on analogies.
We didn't notice.
So yeah. So what you just said would be like looking like two guys in Asheville looking at each other and saying, "Hey, I want you to set me up. What are you looking for in a woman? She has a job. Cool. That just culled out 70% of the dating pool in Asheville. So we're down to 30. Cool. You gave me really good direction there. So on the high side, if you were going in the first round, I like Travis Hunter and Will Johnson as off-ball zone, but they're not going to be there for you. Savon Ravel, who first NFL corner ever that played for the same coach that I did. He's more of a zone guy.
Is he?
He is. I love him in zone. He has that Reek Woolen thing of he is read and react, but he's not good enough with his hands. I love Ravel. He's in my top 20 overall.
Yeah, I like him.
I am drunk on the tape on him, and it just so happens that I'm connected with that program well enough because I do know Mike, even though he's been fired now, that the medical on him is going to be fine. It was a clean tear. Yeah. There was no ancillaries to the other two ligaments. Savon Ravel is going to be fine. But I do like him better in zone. I love Trey Amos. If you're looking for somebody that's going to play up in your face, because Trey Amos plays like he's trying to get somebody in his family to tell them they're proud of him, because he wants to get in everybody's face. He is hyper aggressive. He's not crazy athletic, which is weird because he has a track background.
Yeah.
But he's not crazy straight line fast. I love Trey Amos. Now, if you're looking for that middle of late 3, maybe even into 4, Noel Williams from Cal.
Okay.
It is such a hard evaluation because it's like this beautiful rose that is growing up out of a garbage heap. because it was literally Noel Williams and Teddy Buchanan and 9 guys that are going to be CPAs in 2 years because there are no other NFL football players on that defense. But Noel Williams has that. He's got that just aggressive, get into your face, press man. He's really good with his hands. Another one that's not super straight line fast, which I think will push him down. I want to say he ran a 4.54 at the combine. I don't have that pulled up in front of me. That's the number that I have in my head. I feel like that is the guy if you're looking for man.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a guy that plays predominantly man, and look, every corner in the NFL has to play man and zone. Nobody gets to just come in and I only play man. And Mr. Quarterback, the fact I'm here, let me tell you that we're playing man. It doesn't work that way. So you got to kind of mitigate the risk. Like Savon Ravel, he can play man, to what I said. I like him better in a system like Todd Bowles where he's going to play zone 75% of the time because he's blitzing guys from the inside and I'm dropping back and reading and reacting. Man corners, I like Trey Amos. I'm in not love with Azareye'h Thomas.
Dude, the 40 time has hurt me a little bit with him because I think he ran a 4.6 at his pro day, something like that.
Yeah, he did.
It sounds right. Yeah, look, I'm a Florida State guy. I can just tell you, I kept seeing him in the first round going, don't do that. Don't do that. You won't like how it goes. But look,
but at 61,
he's just raw.
I think he's physical, he's long, he plays man coverage well. I think the one thing I'm glad you brought up Trey Amos because I think the one thing I think that if there was a third sentence to this Dan Quinn corner is the ball skills. And I think Trey Amos has good ball skills. And I think Azareye'h Thomas is a good man, good tackler, maybe converts to safety at some point, but the ball skills aren't always there. So that's where I think I'm glad you brought up Trey Amos because we've talked about him a little bit on this show. Like, again, I think his effort's a little bit up and down, like in terms of like down to down, like I'm just going to pursue to the football, make every tackle. But in terms of the stuff you described, like the press ability, the zone reactions, like it's there. And he's a good body size too. But the ball skills and the tackling, I think, are good enough with that I think that's an interesting person to bring up.
Amos is he's a really good tackler when he's a really good tackler. There are other times he comes in a little high.
That's what I'm saying. It's like he's an interesting watch because, like, I don't want to say it's effort, but there's something like when you watch Azareye'h Thomas, like that dude is there to play football. Like there's nothing else going on. He's like, I'm here to tackle and here to play man coverage, and that's all I'm doing. And when you watch Trey Amos, it's like there's a lackadaisicalness. I don't even know if that's the right way to. You know what I'm talking about, Jeremy? Like, yeah. And it's hard to jive whether. And like he's a person that I'd like to have a meeting with and be like, what's going on? Like, what's the coaching here? Why are we doing that? But in terms of the parameters that we laid out for you, I think he's a really interesting prospect for the Commanders.
So Amos is interesting for me solely because he was on 3 teams 3 years, and he never took hold at Alabama for whatever reason. There was something that happened there that they just weren't. They didn't click because that tape is really clunky. I think if he had gone to Ole Miss 3 years ago and he had been able to develop in one system and he wasn't thinking so much, I think when I watched his tape, it felt to me like he was in his own head a lot, especially in zone. And if you watch his progression in zone over the course of the year, in the beginning of the year, I hated it. I mean, it was clunky. It was like he was trying to get to a spot and everything else was just kind of happening in a vacuum around him. As time went on, he got more comfortable in dropping into zone and trying to read and react and use the ball skills, and the tackling started to improve. So I think that's why I'm so high on him. I'm always really curious of how much tread is left on that tire. Trey Amos, I think, there's a lot of room to grow here. I don't necessarily feel that way about Azareye'h Thomas.
Sure.
Because Azareye'h plays, look, he plays the way he plays. He is a bully corner.
Yeah.
He is a bully corner that unfortunately is not all that fast. And he really needs to develop with the hands, with some of the things, because if that initial punch is there, he's fine. If that initial punch doesn't completely land and just completely stunt a wide receiver, then your physical limitations start coming into this. I'll be honest with you, he kind of reminds me of Jalon Ramsey in the way that he plays. Jalon Ramsey was just such a freak athlete that he could make up for it all.
Yeah. No, he's a little stiff. Like there's something like, again, I like the player a lot, but there are some physical limitations to him. And that's where, again, like I'm glad you brought up Trey Amos because I think he fits in that I'm trying to think. Benjamin Morris is another guy that I like the film at Notre Dame. The hip injury is a little bit concerning, obviously. I want to hear what you got to say about him for sure.
I love the player.
Right.
The injury scares the heeper-jeepers out of me.
Yeah.
Because there are like 4 parts of your body that I really don't want at 21, 22 years old for you to already be having issues with. Your brain and your heart are 1 and 2. Your hip, your knee, and your shoulder are 3, 4, and 5. And hip's probably the highest on that high side for me because we're developing stuff. Knees have been happening for so long that the tech and the science of it has gotten so much better. I'm going to fait accompli. I don't really worry about knee injuries all that much. You tell me a guy had an ACL, awesome. I've seen 50,000 guys come back from ACLs.
Yeah.
We get into shoulders and hips. That's more of a ball joint that I don't necessarily know that we have. Most people that have hip and shoulder problems are older people. So we're looking to make it functional for the rest of your life, not functional for you to be an NFL football player. And so that ball joint in the hip, that makes me super nervous. It also makes me nervous that I don't know what the second procedure was. So he had the hip surgery during the season. He had another procedure sometime during the off season, and nobody will tell me what it was. They could have been cleaning up fluid for all I know. I have no idea. Frankly, they could have given him a bionic hip that Tony Stark gave them. I don't know. And no one will tell me. So I kind of feel like I'm riding blind. I have a second-round grade on Morrison. He does fit into what you said.
Yeah.
I think there's a great chance. 32 teams in the NFL, I'll bet you there's 24 that don't have him on the board.
Because of the medical.
There's too much coy.
Yeah.
I mean, look, Notre Dame is notoriously coy about medical anyway. Benjamin Morrison's been pretty upfront and honest until we get into what happened. Where are you? When are you going to be back? And I have a weird feeling. I think Benjamin Morrison's going to sink like a rock. Hey, there's a possibility you could get him in late 4, early 5.
Because the film's good. The film's good.
It is.
And that's too bad because I think he's a good football player. I think he fits what Washington wants. But again, the hip injury, and that's
There's
the thing.
No way if that is true that any team is going to risk a second-round pick on him.
Yeah,
he should have gone back to school. If there are 2 causes that I can really get behind. The first one is keep the combine in Indianapolis for the rest of my natural-born life. You can move it the year I die. I do not care.
When that
but
book
Indianapolis
comes out.
is perfect.
when the book comes out.
For sure. The book can come out. I'll give you a map of where to put it from there on. The other thing is I know we have an advisory panel in the NFL that tells you where your draft stock is, and it'll tell you a round. I wish we would start as a league. We just all come together. Logan, I think you would be great at this. A lot of former players to just sit down, even on a Zoom call with these guys for 20 or 30 minutes and just go, here is the pitfall of what you're doing. All right, you're coming off a hip injury. You need to come back and give us a year of tape to show that you're okay. Because you can give us the mouth words all you want to that you're fine. I'm not going to believe it until I see it. And then you're coy about it and you can't work out. And really all you're doing is heaping up the stack of issues that I may have. And it gets to a certain point. I got 540 guys on the board.
Yeah.
You're good. You're not good enough for me to ignore all of these things. You're not Jahad Campbell, who has a shoulder injury that I knew nothing about. He's a special talent. I think you are a very good talent, but you add that injury to it. Kid, you'll be better off going back to school. Make your NIL money. Show that you're good, even if you don't start the year. You need to be good by January, so when we go through this process next year, you don't have any of these questions. Then you're a first-round pick. Then you you're not a dart a team throws at a board in the hopes that maybe this works out, because that makes your career trajectory so much harder. It's so much easier to be a first, second, third-round pick because more than likely you are a need for a team. They identified you as the need for the team, and they are going to be super committed to you. A fifth-round pick, they're not super committed to you. If you come in here and that hip is off kilter, you could be on the street looking for a job because I'm not going to lose my job over a kid that I took in the 5th round. If I need to cut bait, I'll cut bait.
Yeah. No, that's great, and hopefully kids would heed that. Logan, I'm going to say we got time for one more. Is there one more position we want to do attack, whether it's O-line, running back, anything else? We could do this for hours. Obviously, we kind of do sometimes, whether the mics are and the cameras are rolling or not. But we got to pick one more for this podcast. Maybe some folks around the DMV hit a little traffic. The pod's a little longer today. We're going to get them home. I'm going to make the executive call. We got time for one more.
Yeah. So I would say, I don't know. Offensive line is always interesting to me because I feel like you can never have enough good offensive linemen. I'd say defensive tackle potentially, but Washington drafted one last year. It is a deep group, so it feels like in that fourth round area there should be a defensive tackle. So let's do this. How about, is there an offensive lineman that you like late? And is there a defensive tackle that you like late? So developmental offensive lineman, tackle or guard. And is there a defensive tackle that, again, I think there's a starting or at least a rotational caliber player in the defensive tackle room that you can get in the fourth round. Thoughts?
So a defensive tackle that I like late.
Yes.
I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you one at all three techniques.
Oh, love it. Let's do it.
So I really like Zeke Biggers from Georgia Tech as a developmental nose.
So So he's an interesting prospect because, again, his name is very fitting. It should help you remember him. He's from Georgia Tech. He's a huge man. He's got a huge wingspan, crazy arm length. He moves well. He's like 330. He's a big dude, but like a wild stallion raw. So I love that you brought him up because he like late guy, like 5th, 6th, 7th kind of round guy. He talk about a developmental athlete. He fits that bill to me 100%.
So on my show, we call those BDDs. That's a big damn dude. And he fits that. And look, I like the tape on him.
No,
the thing about Zeke Biggers is that he was not asked to play true nose. So when you say wild stallion raw, you're going to put, because I think he really only plays nose in the NFL. He's a 3-4 nose.
Yeah.
You're going to bring him into a position in the NFL that he's never played before.
Right.
So you're taking that raw, malleable talent. You got to focus all of your energy on he is a 1 tech, 0 tech nose tackle, and just know it's going to take a year or two. And then you'll know what you got. It may be nothing, but that's the reason we have so many rounds in these drafts. Let's see. 3 tech. You're going to tell me I'm crazy on this kid. I have a funny feeling. I am so much higher on this kid that you would think I was a member of his family. Thor Griffith from Louisville.
Okay.
He was a transfer. I think he went to Harvard, and he transferred from Harvard to Louisville.
What a difference of life that's got to be.
So he was Defensive Player of the Year in the conference that he came from. I'm 99% sure it was Harvard.
What's his name? Thor? Would you say what is it?
Thor Griffith.
Right,
which, by the way, all name team.
Yeah, you're 2 for 2 on that.
Your parents had really narrowed you into. You either better look like Chris Hemsworth or you better be a bad dude.
And he was
a name like Thor. You're getting in some bar fights if you're not.
He is a Harvard transfer.
That's what I thought. He went to Harvard. And look, I like the tape on him. He's very developmental. He kind of reminds me of Eric Johnson. That was and that's a super deep dive. I don't expect either one of you to know who that is. It's a guy I fell in love with like 2 years ago. He came into the league and disappeared because, he wasn't all that great. But he reminds me of a good version of that. And then you were talking about 5 techs earlier. I don't have a ton of 5 techs in this class. The one that I'm telling you, this kid's going to be really, really good is Elijah Roberts from SMU.
I like him. I like his teammate too. The what's his name? He's got like the hyphen name. Oh God.
I've got it right here.
Jared Elijah Harrison Hunte is his name. Is the other guy that I like a lot. So both those guys from SNU are I think are really good football players. Are really good football players.
Roberts to me has a high end upside of I think he can be a high end pass rusher from that 5 tech spot.
He reminds me of Dietrich Wise.
I can see that.
I could
very much see that.
And that's kind of
look,
vibe.
He's got a funny story. Elijah Roberts was a ballyhooed recruit that went to Miami and didn't do squat. And then he transferred to SMU.
And played well.
and played really well.
I was watching the Clemson game with him, and I was just like, who is this guy? I didn't even know he wasn't on the list that I had, and I looked him up afterwards and was like, dang, this guy can kind of ball a little bit. So impressive.
He was one of those that I actually went all the way to the ACC championship game, which I say all the way. It was like an hour and a half for me. It's not like I trekked across the desert through broken glass. I took a 90-minute drive down the interstate. Elijah Roberts and the running back, Brashard Smith, were really the two guys I wanted to see.
I love Brashard Smith. I'm in on that 100%. Can't tell me otherwise.
He's easy to love.
Dude, he's like this playmaking offensive weapon. Love it. Okay, so now 2 offensive linemen, and then we'll call it.
Okay. Linemen. Oh, I've got some good linemen.
Some deep cuts here.
I've got some deep cuts at linemen. Let me move my. I'm not quite at the point that I can get into the deep cuts without at least having my notes to remind me of guys. Jalen Travis from Iowa State is one that I like a great deal.
My guy. Look at us.
You're right. Also, how many dudes are named Jaden or Jalen and went to Iowa State?
A lot of J's in this class.
There are 47 Jalens in this class. The draft is going to be really uncomfortable because Roger Goodell is going to step to the podium and say, with the blank pick in the draft, Jalen, and about half of the guys watching the draft, their heart's going to stop and go, is it me? No, it's a Jalen with an I-E-N.
Dude, I like Jalen Travis. I'm in on him. I think he could be a nice swing piece and develop into something more.
He's a nice developmental piece to me. I'm trying to decide. I'm going to give you a super deep cut. If you're looking for a center, Thomas Perry that played at Middlebury College.
That is a deep cut. Yeah,
that's my favorite guy in the draft.
Look. His tape, A, looks like it was shot on the camera that shot the Zapruder film. B, it looks like he may or may not be playing with a group of 8th graders.
Right.
Because he's so much bigger than everybody he's playing against. And he just road grades. It's so funny. He gets out in space in front of the running back, and it just looks like a grown man just stiff-arming children in the face.
Somebody check that kid's birth certificate.
Oh, for sure. Oh, if this was AAU, this kid would have to give everything short of a blood sample to prove how old he is. Another one I really like, now this is getting more into the actual, the meat and potatoes of the draft. I really like Marcus Weir from Montana State.
Okay.
He's a guard. I really like Jackson Slater from Sacramento State.
He's a good football player, man.
He's a dog. He is a dog. And then 2 more small school guys. Carson Vinson from Alabama A&M.
Love that you brought him up.
Clay Webb from Jacksonville State. Clay Webb has one of the weirdest bounces around the world. He was like a top 10 recruit in the country. Goes to Georgia, physically cannot get on the field. And now if you think about all the offensive linemen that have been drafted at Georgia over the last few years, kind of makes sense. Goes to Jacksonville State. He's the highest rated offensive lineman in the country.
Wow.
And then I as a Tar Heel affiliate, I do have to, my guy, Willie Lampkin, who's I think 5'7" and built like a brick excrement house.
Yeah, 5'7", 270. Looks like he was at the Senior Bowl and had some funny reps with that guy from Kentucky, that Deion Walker guy who's 6'7". Yeah,
dude. If Deion Walker had the same mentality that Willie Lampkin does, there would have been dudes that wouldn't have made it out of Mobile alive.
That's true.
The problem is that what was that show that it had all the like different colored Teletubbies? Deion Walker has a Teletubby mentality. He just stands in the middle of the line and dances.
That's true. He does do that.
And I stand here and I'm in the way, and that's good enough for me, and it should be good enough for you.
Oh, man. Well, I guess that's where we leave it. I will say, we have a little bit of breaking news to end the podcast. The most exciting quarterback in the NFL has been traded. Joe Milton is the new backup in Dallas.
Oh, my God.
Oh, really? God. I knew this trade was coming.
What was the trade?
Schefter just reported the Patriots are trading Joe Milton and a 7th to the Cowboys in exchange for Dallas's compensatory 5th-round pick.
Oh, that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
That felt like a Jerry Jones. He's got a big arm. That kid right there played football.
Jerry ain't wrong on that one.
No,
Yeah, the problem. All right, so I did a live stream last night, and Joe Milton came up because I've been talking about this trade is coming because New England knows they've had him in the room. Joe Milton has a howitzer arm.
Yeah.
The only problem is that he could stand on the shoreline in California and somehow miss the Pacific Ocean.
dude.
But the thing is, his arm's strong enough. He might
200 yards and land dead left of him.
It might land in the Atlantic, which is
might.
both cool and terrifying.
It could land in Tokyo. You know where it's not going to land? Where he meant for it to. And that's the thing that scares me the most. I watched him at the Senior Bowl last year. And this is sorry to run long, but I got to tell this story. Anytime Joe Milton's name comes up,
we're a pro Joe Milton podcast in terms of story time. We're not saying he's good, but damn, is he entertaining?
Yeah. Oh, he's very entertaining. So I took my dad with me to the Senior Bowl. He retired. He's a photographer. I needed a photographer. Gave me a reason to go down and watch practices and have some adult beverages with my dad. We go down there, and my dad's not a draft guy. He calls me and goes, "Hey, the team I like drafted blank. Does he suck?" And I get that question like 8 times every year at the draft. So he goes down, watches the workouts. He falls in love with Tavondre Sweat.
Yes.
I thought he was going to follow Tavondre Sweat around like he was a Swiftie. And he fell in love with Joe Milton. And so the whole week he keeps telling me, this kid's got a big arm. He could be a great quarterback in the league. So the Saturday, this will be the only time I ever go to the game, but I did go to the game. We're sitting on the field, or standing on the field. And I said to him, watch the ball boy. He's watching him throw these big 70-yard darts. Watch the ball boy. He's trying to hit him. And the ball boy is going to have a stroke trying to catch up to how sporadic he is being. He was sending him over the sideline at times. He's not meaning to do that. And I think it's so funny. That is the Jerry Jonesiest thing I think I've ever heard. We need to I mean, look, I know y'all are Commanders guys, so you love to just sit back and watch Jerry do Jerry things. We need to have like an intervention for Jerry Jones.
Yeah.
Dude, you are so bad at this.
And he's gotten worse.
Really stop.
It's so much. I mean, I used to work in Dallas. It's worse now than it was 10 years ago. I mean, the agent Micah stuff this week. Ooh, buddy. That's
brutal.
That's a bad look, to say the least.
Brutal. And I mean, and then he goes on Landman and he's with Billy Bob Thornton. And did you see that?
He acted his face off, though. I mean, he was himself.
I don't think he was acting. I think they told Jerry, tell your life story, Jerry. And Jerry got in there. He's like, "Yeah, you get to spend time with your family. And what could be better than," and you're just like, "Oh my God, this is incredible." And like what he says is awesome till you remember that this is a multi-billion-dollar corporate business. And the point is to win football games.
My wife, when we saw that live, she was like, "Oh my God, is Jerry Jones a really good actor?" And I went, "No." They put a camera on him and said, I don't even think they gave him a script. No. I think they just said, "Jerry, go be you."
It's whatever the step beyond method acting is. There's a great, I can't remember who the actor was that he told this to, but I'm pretty sure the guy who said the quote was Patrick Stewart. And he was like working with one of these American method actors who's walking around set like an absolute crazy person because he's in character and can't break it. And eventually Patrick Stewart looks at him and he goes, "It's called acting, my boy." And I think that's kind of what happened with Jerry Jones there. I
just feel like I don't even know that Jerry knew there was a camera. I think they told him John Hamm was in the hospital, and he just went in there and started talking to him.
Yeah.
Like, well, bought this team, really wanted to work with my family.
Yeah. Or they told him it was the Netflix the cheerleader series. It's the reality show, and they didn't tell him it was a drama. Jeremy Greene, everybody. Jeremy, if people want more work from you, where would you like them to go?
You can find me on Twitter at JGreenESPN. You can find my website is NFLDraft.net. And then you can find me weekdays at noon on YouTube and all of the other, literally every platform short of OnlyFans at the Sportsocracy. We have an OnlyFans, but it's
it's not draft. It's different
kind
of draft content.
Well, I mean, it's the saddest thing in the world that you have an OnlyFans that makes $6 a month. Like, that's sad.
Help him make 7, everybody. next week, I'm so sorry to do this to our guest next week. Guys, next Thursday on the show is Dane Brugler. The Beast comes out
infinitely smarter than me, by the way.
The Beast comes out on Wednesday. Dane's going to join us on Thursday. We got a mailbag early next week, so get your questions in then. This show is 150% longer than it normally is, but it was worth it. You're welcome. We'll see you next time on Take Command.